been trying to fix my house, but the rain keeps pouring down. Yeah, yeah. And I can't seem to find a leak. Yeah, 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 yeah. And I've been trying to figure out what this life is all about. Oh, yeah. So Lord, would you please speak to me? Yeah, yeah. 'Cause I know I'm prone to try to dethrone you from my heart. Oh, but you are so faithful, you won't let me tear us apart. Oh, yeah. So God, I need you to give me eyes to see all of the things that you're doing for me. 'Cause Lord, I need you to fix what's broken in me. To tell you the truth, I need you to be my everything. To be my everything. To be my everything. To be my everything. Be my everything. And I finally understand that I'm only just a man. Yeah, yeah. And I need you so desperately. Oh, oh, yeah, yeah. 'Cause I know I'm prone to try to dethrone you from my heart. Oh, but you are so faithful, you won't let me tear us apart. Oh, oh, ooh. So God, I need you to give me eyes to see all the things that you're doing for me. Lord, I need you to fix what's broken in me. To tell you the truth, I need you to be my everything. To be my everything. To be my everything. To be my everything. Be my everything. To be my everything. To be my everything. To be my everything. To be my everything. Oh, yeah. I've been trying to fix my house, but the rain keeps pouring down. Yeah, yeah. And I can't seem to find a leak. Yeah, 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 yeah. And I've been trying to figure out what this life is all about. Oh, yeah. So Lord, would you please speak to me? Yeah, yeah. 'Cause I know I'm prone to try to dethrone you from my heart. Oh, but you are so faithful, you won't let me tear us apart. Oh, yeah. So God, I need you to give me eyes And I finally understand that I'm only just a man, and I need you so desperately. Oh, oh, yeah. 'Cause I know I'm prone to try to dethrone you from my heart. Oh, but you are so faithful, you won't let me tear us apart. So God, I need you to give me eyes to see all the things that you're doing for me. Lord, I need you to fix what's broken in me. To tell you the truth, I need you to be my everything. To be my everything. To be my everything. To be my everything. Be my everything. To be my everything. To be my everything. To be my everything. To be my everything. Oh, yeah. I've been trying to fix my house, but the rain keeps pouring down. Yeah. And I can't seem to find a leak. Yeah. And I've been trying to figure out what this life is all about. Oh, yeah. So, Lord, would you please speak to me? Yeah. 'Cause I know I'm prone to try to dethrone you from my heart. Oh, but you are so faithful, you won't let me tear us apart. So God, I need you to give me eyes to see all of the things that you're doing for me. Good Lord, I need you to fix what's broken in me. To tell you the truth, I need you to be my...
At 40 with wind chills. Walk to work because the buses were running.
I was talking to my buddy in Boston this morning. He's taking his Corvette for a trip to Cape Cod because he said it's like 20 degrees right now. And I was like, wow, that sounds fantastic.
Exactly.
So,
It hasn't been that bad this week. We've had a lot of fun.
yeah, it's beautiful today. I mean, it's a little chilly, but
All right.
all right.
So, Matthew 27. Sorry, I was trying to figure out a way to get the audio feed that is going to, like, their YouTube recording into the Zoom, but whenever I tried to do that, it was giving really, really bad feedback, so we'll figure it out. But can you guys still hear me okay? Okay. Keep working on the audio. Matthew 27. And we're going to pick up in verse 11. Is there any way we can put her? She is super distracting. Matthew 27, verse 11. It says, "Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, saying, 'Are you the king of the Jews?' And Jesus said to him, 'It is as you say.' And while he was being accused by the chief priests and the elders, he answered nothing. Then Pilate said to him, 'Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?' But he answered him not one word, so that the governor marveled greatly. Now, at the feast, the governor was accustomed to releasing to the multitude one prisoner whom they wished. And at that time they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore, when they had gathered together, Pilate said to them, 'Whom do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who was called the Christ?' For he knew that they had handed him over because of envy. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent to him, saying, 'Have nothing to do with this just man, for I have suffered many things in a dream because of him today.' But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the multitudes that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor answered and said to them, 'Which of the two do you want me to release to you?' And they said, 'Barabbas.' And Pilate said to them, 'What then shall I do with Jesus, who is called the Christ?' They said to him, 'Let him be crucified.' Then the governor said, 'Why? What evil has he done?' But they cried out all the more, saying, 'Let him be crucified.' When Pilate saw that he could not prevail at all, but rather that the tumult was rising, he took water, washed his hands before the multitude, saying, 'I'm innocent of the blood of this just man, of this just person. You see to it.' And all the people answered and said, 'His blood be upon us and our children.'" Let's pray. Father, again, I come before you this morning and just thank you for this time, Lord. Lord, I know that we're still figuring things out and lighting is off and sound may not be really loud and clear, but either way, Lord, we're here together to be in your presence, to sit at your feet, or to hear the voice of your Holy Spirit. We don't need lighting or sound or cameras or anything to be able to do that. So God, I'm asking, meet us in this place. Speak to us from your word. You're always faithful to do that, Lord. So truly the prayer is just give us ears to hear. Give us hearts that even hunger to hear from you this morning, Jesus. Pray these things in your name. Amen. Amen. All right, so we are winding down in the Gospel of Matthew, just one more chapter after this. It's been over 2 years since we've been in the Gospel, so I commend you and your faithfulness and your steadfastness, but hopefully it's been good. Whenever you're talking about the life of Jesus, it's like, how can you possibly go wrong, right? But I want to take a minute and I want to draw your attention back to the very beginning, right? The purpose why Matthew wrote this book, okay? So help refresh all of our memories. Why did Matthew write this book? Who was Matthew writing to? Like, what is the point of this gospel? You guys can talk. Remember, we're back to interactive, engaging church. Who's Matthew writing to? Why is he writing? Okay, so he's writing to the Jews. It's his audience. Why is he writing to the Jews?
To prove that Jesus was the Messiah.
To prove that Jesus was the Messiah, right? Listen, Matthew is writing to Jews about a Jew named Jesus to prove to them that he is the Jewish king, that he was the Messiah that they had been waiting for, the one that they had longed for. And so I think it's important for us to circle back to that purpose, because as we're going chapter by chapter, we can kind of lose sight of that lens. But that's really important. Like, it's really, really important in understanding the entire Gospel of Matthew. right? Notice the entire forest as you're going to see each tree. So understand that the overarching point of Matthew is he is writing to the Jews about a Jew named Jesus to prove that he was their king. Okay? It's also going to become very, very important in understanding today's lesson. So we'll see that in a moment. But let's take a look, dive deeper. Back to verse 11. It says, now Jesus stood before the governor. Who is this governor? Pilate, right? Pilate's a really, really interesting guy. It says here, most of your Bibles translate it as governor, but he's actually what you would call like a prefect, meaning, and I think I mentioned this last week, like he was assigned by Caesar to go and oversee a small territory in their empire, so outside of Rome, outside of the Roman city. So the Romans had conquered pretty much the then known world. But if there was an area that you had some rebel rousers, some troublemakers, you sent a Roman prefect to be able to go and oversee that area. What was the preferred method was to be able to have someone from that land, right, one of their own people who was aligned with the Romans, oversee the places that Rome had conquered. But when a non-Roman, right? So the preferred method was to be able to have someone from that foreign land, an official, someone well-respected, who was on board with the Romans, oversee that particular area. But this wasn't working in Judea. So they had to send Pilate in to squash some of the issues, right? Pilate was not a nice guy. History tells us over and over again, like Pilate he just wasn't a good guy, right? He was... My Siri is talking to me. He was cruel. He was demanding. He was power hungry. And he really... He really did not like the Jews. Did not like the Jews at all. Oh my goodness. Technology is going off. Judah, can you just turn my phone off? Just power it off. Craziness. So that's who history records this Pilate to be. But when you read the story, like we read this account, like it doesn't seem like the same guy. Like the guy in this story, he seems cowardly. He seems, like overly nice to Jesus, right? He seems extremely passive. He seems almost intimidated by the Jews, which is why some people have questioned whether or not, like, is this real? Like, there seems to be something amiss in this story. Understand this. So again, we have to look back in history. Pilate was on the hot seat at this moment. Kind of like if you follow sports, when coaches have messed up a few times and like everyone knows like their job is on the line, that's Pilate's situation right now. Like there have been 3 rebellions in the time that he's been the overseer of Judea, right? And all of those situations were his own fault, his own doing. When he first came into Jerusalem, he had the Roman armies march onto the Temple Mount, and they were carrying their banners, their insignias, which had like, the Roman crest and animals and eagles. And so for the Jews to see that on their Temple Mount, like that was idolatrous. And so they rebelled against it, and it was like intense fighting in the city. He also decided that he wanted to bring fresh water into the city, so he wanted to build a brand new aqueduct. But do you know where he got the money from? The temple. So he stole from the offerings that were given to the temple to fund his new project, which again did not make the Jews happy. And they rebelled again. Right? So he's already had 3 strikes against him. 3 rebellions. Apparently in old Roman history you get 4 strikes instead of 3. But he's on his 4th strike. And one more and he is definitely out. Which makes sense when you see kind of like his trepidatious sort of attitude, or he doesn't want to really offend the Jews, or he doesn't really want to rock the boat, like he's trying to play middle ground. So, really interesting. When we read Matthew's account, it seems like this is his first meeting with Jesus, right? Right? But this is actually his second meeting with Jesus. Pilate and Jesus had actually had a meeting prior to the one that we see here in Matthew 27. Turn over to Luke 23. Luke 23. And in verse 1. It says, "Then the whole multitude of them arose and led him to Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, 'We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ, a king.' Then Pilate asked him, saying, 'Are you the king of the Jews?' He answered and said, 'It is as you say.' So Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowd, 'I find no fault in this man.' But they were the more fierce, saying, 'He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, beginning from Galilee to this place.'" Right? And when Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked if the man was a Galilean. And as soon as he knew that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at this time. Okay? So understand, we got to piece things together chronologically. So Jesus has the meeting at night with the Jewish leaders. Okay? Then last week we saw that they had another meeting early in the morning, and we discussed how that was important because they violated their own laws having the first meeting and convicting Jesus at night. Now that they had the legal meeting, they marched Jesus to Pilate, which is what we see here in Luke. And Pilate questions Jesus. He interacts with him a bit, right? You actually see they have a much longer conversation if you look over to John's gospel. But when they bring Jesus to Pilate, the charge is changed. What do they accuse Jesus of doing here before Pilate? What's the new charge? In Luke, what we just read. What are the charges they bring to Pilate? Why do they say, hey, Jesus, this guy, he's horrible, he needs to be killed? What are the charges? The first one's in verse 2, to give you a hint. What's the first charge?
To forbid from paying taxes to Caesar.
Yeah. This is tax evasion, right? They're accusing Jesus of tax evasion. And this guy doesn't pay taxes, and he tells others not to pay taxes either. Now, is this true?
No.
No. Just the opposite. I mean, we've read the story when Jesus said, hey, give to Caesar what's Caesar's. Jesus was not against paying taxes. But that's what they're saying, right? And they bring a second charge. So first they say there's tax evasion. And then in verse 5, what are they accusing him of? Say it so everyone can.
He stirs up the people.
She says he stirs up the people. So first is tax evasion. Next is insurrection. They're saying, hey, this guy's a rebel. He says that he's a king. And we being good, affiliates of Rome, we only serve one king, and that's Caesar. But this guy, Jesus, I mean, he's a rebel. He's someone that you need to watch out for. He's a threat to the Roman government. Why did they have to change their accusations against Jesus? Remember, when they had their own private trial, it was all about blasphemy. Hey, this guy is making himself equal with God. But when they come to Pilate, it's tax evasion and insurrection or rebellion. Why do they change it?
Because they wouldn't care about Jesus being blasphemous.
Why is Pilate going to care? Pilate doesn't care whether or not this guy says he's God, right? But he should care if this guy is a threat to the Roman government. So they change their charges. Pilate, like I mentioned before, he has a private conversation with Jesus. Look at that in John 18. We don't have time to read it today. But Pilate goes in depth, and he's really questioning Jesus, trying to get to know him. But he can easily see by his conversation with Jesus, he's like, hey man, these charges, these are trumped up charges. There's no way this guy before me is a threat to the Roman government. They have absolutely no weight to them, right? But he was stuck, right? I already told you that he's got 3 strikes, 1 more, and it's bye-bye Pilate, right? And so he doesn't want to do anything to offend the Jews and to cause another riot. But at the same time, he knows he has this innocent guy, Jesus. So what does he do? But in the story, the Jews actually give Pilate a way out. He finds a loophole. As they're bringing these charges against Jesus, they make mention that Jesus is actually from what town? Where's Jesus from? Galilee, right? He's from the north. Pilate is just the governor or the prefect of the south, of Judea. So he's like, sweet, I don't have to deal with this guy. It's out of my jurisdiction. I'm going to send him to Herod. And it just so happened that Herod, the regional governor of the north, he was in Jerusalem as well because this is Passover. Everyone's in the city. So he's like, shoot, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And so he can make peace with Herod because they kind of had a contentious relationship. And I don't have to deal with this Jesus situation. So he ships Jesus over to Herod. You can read, if you continue to read the rest of Luke here, you can see Jesus' interaction with Herod, but it doesn't go good, right? Herod asked Jesus all these questions. It actually says that Herod, he was eager to meet Jesus. I mean, he'd heard about Jesus. Everyone heard about Jesus, heard about the miracles, heard about the healings. And Herod hoped, like, maybe this guy will do some sort of magic trick for me. So he's really, really excited to meet with Jesus. But the entire time, Jesus doesn't even say a word to Herod. Now, if you're wondering who this Herod is, this is not the Herod that tried to kill Jesus when he was a baby. This is his son. This is the Herod that, remember, killed John the Baptist. It actually says that he was really intrigued by John and liked to hear John. But then his wife doesn't like John because he was calling out their marriage and that it was an immoral relationship. So she sends in her daughter. The daughter dances for Herod. Herod foolishly says, hey, I'll give you anything for this wonderful dance, up to half my kingdom. And she asks for the head of John the Baptist. And so Herod chops off John's head, right? It's that Herod that Jesus is talking with now. Well, actually, he doesn't talk with him, right? So he says absolutely nothing to Herod. And Herod's like, man, I'm not dealing with this. So Herod sends Jesus back to Pilate. So where we pick up in Matthew, this is now Jesus' return meeting with Pilate. It's his second meeting, okay? Back to verse.
Did they have to do anything about it anyway, though? I mean, can't they just be like, it's the Jews. They don't have to be a part of their business anyway.
So, sorry, clarify a question. So, does who have to do anything?
Pilate or Herod.
Well,
It's not a big deal to them. It's like, it doesn't affect them. So, they could just be like, you guys take care of your own thing.
They could. So, Becca, can everyone hear her question? So she's asking, why does it matter to Pilate anyway? Right? Like, why even go back to them? Why not just like take care of Jesus yourself? We talked about this last week. Why do they have to go back to Pilate?
Because they can't do anything on their own.
Yeah. Not just they couldn't do anything on their own, but what could they not do? What did they lost the legal right to do? What was that, Vivian? Yeah. Yeah, they didn't have the legal right to the death penalty. So they had to get that approval from Herod. So they go back, verse 11. It says, and the governor asked him, saying, are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus said to him, it is as you say. Remember, the Jews bring Jesus to Pilate and accuse him of being a rebel, a threat to the throne of Caesar. But think about this, right? Like, Pilate sees Jesus, and at this point, he's already bloody. He's already beaten. He knows the background. I mean, this is the son of a carpenter from a podunk town in northern Israel. Is this guy a threat? No. Like, he's the least threatening person, right? And so when Pilate asked this question, are you the king of the Jews? I'm guessing it's with sarcasm in his tone. Like there's no way this guy is a king, right? So here Matthew notes that Jesus confirms his kingship with Pilate, but in just a few words. But again, if you read John's account, and I encourage you, go back and read John 18, and you'll see that Jesus and Pilate actually have a much longer exchange. And that's when Jesus tells Pilate, hey, I'm absolutely a king, but my kingdom, it's not of this world. If my kingdom was of this world, man, my people would be fighting for me. Okay? But Pilate asks him this really important question. I want you guys to keep that question in the back of your mind as we're continuing on with today's study. He asks him, are you the king? Are you the king? Remember, that's what Matthew's whole gospel is about. It's coming back to this question. Verse 12, it says, and while he was being accused by the chief priests and the elders, he answered nothing. Then Pilate said to him, do you not hear how many things they testify against you? But he answered him not one word. So the governor marveled greatly. Why is Pilate so amazed by this? I mean, the guy's not saying anything, so why is that so amazing? Why is Pilate so amazed by Jesus? What do you think? Take a guess. Wild stab. Why is Pilate so... They're accusing Jesus. Jesus is saying nothing. And it says that Pilate is amazed by all of this. So my question is, why is he so amazed? Like, it seems kind of an awkward thing for him to be. You gotta talk loud so everyone can hear you.
Like, is it because Jesus is not answering, like, his humility, or is it just confused? I don't know.
So Becca says maybe it's just his humility that he's not, speaking up. Any other takers? Okay. Think about this. Pilate has probably, overseen thousands of situations like these before. He's a governor. One of his main things is to be able to have to put people on trial and see whether or not the charges are legit and whether or not they should be punished or set free. So he's gone through this 1,000 times, right? And so in this situation, you have a guy being accused of a capital crime, something that can cost him his life. And people are hurling accusation after accusation after accusation. And what is his response? Nothing. He does not defend himself in the least bit. This is astonishing. I mean, just think about it. If you are on trial and your neck is on the line, what are you going to do? Anything and everything to escape this punishment. You are going to fight tooth and nail. And that's what Pilate was used to. He was used to people just defending themselves and just trying to find loopholes and find their way out of trouble. He was used to people begging for mercy, pleading for him to be gracious and not levy that punishment upon them of death. But here you have Jesus doing absolutely nothing. Why? Why? Because this is what he came for. This is what he came for. Jesus isn't trying to escape the cross. This was the reason that he came into this world. Right? Isaiah 53, verse 7 says that he was oppressed. This is a prophecy thousands of years before Christ, but about the Messiah. It says he was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a sheep to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent. So he did not open his mouth. Isaiah foretold thousands of years ago that this is what Jesus was going to do, right? Because he came to be that sacrificial lamb. Verse 15 says, now, at the feast, the governor was accustomed to releasing to the multitude one prisoner whom they wished. And at that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore, when they had gathered together, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Christ?" For he knew that they had handed him over because of envy. Because of envy. So Pilate's not dumb, right? We've said this a few times. He knows Jesus is innocent, and he can tell, hey, this is a personal beef. Right? This is absolutely a personal beef. It has nothing to do with politics or any sort of rebellion against Rome. But at the same time, again, he cannot risk having another rebellion. So Pilate thinks, man, I've got another loophole here, right? It's customary for me to release one prisoner, for me to show an act of mercy and pardon a prisoner during the Passover. And so Pilate gives them the option of Jesus or a guy named Barabbas. Now, show of hands. How many of you growing up, when you read this story or heard it taught in church, like you thought Barabbas was like the worst of the worst? Like he was probably like a homicidal maniac, killed thousands of people, robbed all sorts of houses. He might have been a rapist. Like all these things just rolled into one. Like Barabbas was absolutely horrible. So how many of you guys reading the story and hearing it taught in church were a bit confused? Like, yeah, I know they hate Jesus, but why in the world would they choose this horrible, horrible criminal Barabbas and want him to go free? Like no one wants child molesters and rapists running free in their neighborhoods. You want to keep those people behind bars, right? So how many of you were always a bit confused and felt a bit uneasy? Like it doesn't make sense. Like, yes, they hate Jesus, but why would you let this guy go free? So how many of you guys were a bit puzzled by that growing up? All right, so you guys are obviously like much wiser than I am, because I was always confused by that. Like it didn't make sense, right? Even if you hate Jesus, it does not make sense to let someone like this go free. Mark chapter 15. Turn over there. Mark chapter 15. In verse 6. It says, "Now at the feast he was accustomed to releasing one prisoner to them, whomever they requested. Now there was one named Barabbas, who was chained with his fellow rebels, and they committed murder in the rebellion." The rebellion. Now that's really, really interesting, right? The word there for rebellion, it's basically an insurrectionist, right? A rebellious person, right? And that in this rebellion, Barabbas actually didn't act alone, but he had a few accomplices. And so Barabbas and his accomplices, like they started this rebellion against Rome, and in their rebellion against Rome, they killed people, right? So notice the irony here, okay? What was Jesus being accused of? We just talked about it. What do they go to Pilate and accuse Jesus of? Jomar, I see your lips moving. Unmute yourself. Insurrection, right? They accused Jesus of being a rebel, but was he? No, right? But Barabbas was. Barabbas was a rebel. This guy truly was a threat to the Roman government. But who did the Jews call for to be released? Barabbas. So put two and two together. Did the Jews really, really care about defending the Roman government? No. Because if not, you leave Barabbas in prison. He was the bigger threat. He had already started a rebellion and killed people in his rebellion, right? So Pilate can clearly see their real motivation here. They didn't care about defending Rome. They didn't care about the name and the household of Caesar. Right? Because if they did, they would not have cheered for the release of Barabbas. Barabbas, to them, he might have been a hero in some people's eyes. I mean, this was a guy who was fighting against the Roman government, who they all hated anyway. Right? So does that put a different spin on why they're fine with releasing this guy Barabbas? He's not this horrible, horrible criminal that we sometimes think of. I mean, he did commit murder and he did commit rebellion, but not horrible in the sense of a danger to their society. But hey, check this out. And this is something that I discovered in studying today and I never thought about before. The plot gets even more interesting, right? When you think about the story of the two criminals that are crucified next to Jesus. Right? How many of you guys love that story? Right? In Luke 23, the two criminals that are crucified on either side of Jesus. We absolutely love that story. Hey, Judah, can you hit admit right there? When we think of that story, or when that story is taught, oftentimes we think of those two guys as what? Bad guys. And sometimes we even get this, like, in some translations, that they are called the two what? They take things. Thieves. How many of you have heard to those guys referred to as the two thieves on the cross?
I have.
Okay. I'm sure you have at some point. But the word used here to describe them is the same word used when describing Barabbas. Right? It's kakurgas. It just means criminal or evildoer. So think about this, right? The Romans were already planning to crucify 3 men. You're like, Marlon, how do you know that they were planning that? Because when Jesus is carrying the cross, I think sometimes we have that picture that like Jesus is carrying a full cross. He's not carrying a full cross. He's carrying a beam. So you carried your beam to the place of crucifixion, but the Romans already had the post laid out in the ground. So there were 3 posts in the ground when Jesus gets there. They were already preparing to crucify 3 people, right? So then think about this, right? When we read Luke's account, the detail of Barabbas, it said that he had accomplices. I don't think that it's a stretch here to think that on that day, that Barabbas was supposed to be crucified with who? His 2 accomplices. Not 2 thieves, but 2 other guys that were in the rebellion of Barabbas. But Barabbas goes free. Right? Pretty interesting. Verse 19. It says, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent to him, saying, have nothing to do with this just man, for I've suffered many things today in a dream because of him. So, Pilate is deliberating, trying to figure out what to do. He knows Jesus is innocent. The charges are bunk. But what's he to do? He doesn't want to create an uproar. To make matters worse, his wife sends a note to him. And she says, hey, I had this dream about this guy, the guy that you have on trial. And hey, just do not do anything to him. Now, we don't know the nature of her dream. We don't know the details of the dream. And we don't even need to speculate about it. But the one thing we do know is that it was about Jesus. And whatever it was shook her to the core. To where she sends a message and was like, don't do anything to this guy. Right? Now, interestingly enough, history tells us that Pilate was married to Claudia Proculia. She's the daughter of Caesar Augustus. We also know from historians that she converted to Judaism, probably as a result of just having to be there in the land for a really long time. But there are reports that after this event, she also became a follower of Christ. So, verse 20. It says, but the chief priests and the elders persuaded the multitude that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor answered and said to them, which of the 2 do you want me to release to you? And they said, Barabbas. And Pilate said to them, what then shall I do with Jesus who is called the Christ? And they said to him, let him be crucified. Then the governor said, why? What evil has he done? But they cried out of the more, saying, "Let him be crucified." I like what Clark says about this portion. He says, "We see here how dangerous wicked priests are in the church of Christ. When pastors are corrupt, they are capable of inducing their flocks to prefer Barabbas to Jesus, to the world over God, and to the pleasures of sense over the salvation of souls." I mean, these are the religious leaders of Israel, and they're stirring people up against their Messiah, right? So Pilate's last-ditch effort to avoid being involved in this doesn't work, right? The people are crying out for Barabbas, and he has to give in. Verse 24, "When Pilate saw that he could not prevail at all, but rather that a tumult was rising, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, 'I'm innocent of the blood of this just man. You see to it.'" So Pilate's stuck. There's no way out. He concedes. But it's interesting. He takes a page out of the Jews' own book when he washes his hands there. That's actually a command in Deuteronomy chapter 21. So the law said that if someone died outside of the city gates and no one knew who did it, the elders of the city would come into the city and they would wash their hands, basically saying, "Hey, we are innocent of this crime." And so Pilate, although he didn't like the Jews, basically he's throwing it back on them and saying, "Hey, I'm innocent of this guy's blood." But was he innocent? No. If anything, he's weak. He's cowardly here. Verse 25, finishing out. It says, "And all the people answered and said, 'His blood be on us and on our children.'" Man, no doubt this statement, this rejection of the Messiah, like it would haunt the Jews for generations. I mean, we see the first sign of that in 70 AD when the Romans march in and just level Jerusalem. Right? But here's the sad thing. This verse in particular has given rise to anti-Semitic feelings and actions. By anti-Semitic, we mean hatred for the Jews, right? And a lot of people have used this verse or, just the idea that the Jews were killers of Jesus to do horrible things to the Jewish nation, right? It is definitely true, guys, that during the Crusades, during things like the Spanish Inquisition, during the Holocaust, Jews were targeted by parts of the church. They were persecuted. They were called Christ killers. Like all those things are, unfortunately, blemishes in church history. Martin Luther, the great reformer. Martin Luther was very anti-Semitic. And you can read a lot about that in the Annals of History as well. But the Jews may have had a hand in his sentencing, but the entire world is guilty of the death of Christ. That's the truth. And persecuting the Jews, come on now, like that's never a good idea. Remember what God told Abraham, Genesis 12:3, "I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you." You don't mess with God's people. All right, so the fate is sealed, the punishment set in stone. Jesus is going to be crucified. But I want to, as we wrap things up, I want to take you back to that question that Pilate asked. He says, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Are you the king? Right? Guys, Jesus didn't just come to be a king in Israel. He came to be your king. He came to be my king. But here's the sad thing. Like the Jews in this story, we often reject Jesus as our king. We often push Jesus off the throne of our hearts. And so as we wrap things up, I want to take a look at 4 reasons why we tend to reject Jesus as king. Okay? It's been long enough. I'm going to stand up. Oh. Hey, Beck, can you adjust the camera up there? Just the buttons on the side. Zoom out on the top. Nope, that's in. Oh, too much. More. That's good. All right. So 4 reasons why we reject Jesus as king. Reason number 1. Reason number one, because he doesn't meet our expectations. All right? Because he doesn't meet our expectations. Focus in on this with me. So, sorry if we're going long, but this is seriously some important stuff. And I think it's something that like we all need to pay attention to, because these are things that we're all guilty of. We reject Jesus as king because he doesn't meet our expectations. Since the fall, since Adam and Eve, the Jews expected a Messiah, right? They expected a Savior to come into the world. God had promised David. He promised David, hey, David, I'm going to give you a son, a ruler, a king just like you. And his throne is going to be forever. And so the Jews, they longed for a king like David, a warrior. David defeated Goliath. He conquered their enemies. He led them to victory after victory. The height of David's reign, like Israel was at its peak, right? And so they wanted a king like that. They expected a Messiah to come like that. But then you have this guy, Jesus, come on the scene. This son or stepson of a carpenter. Again, from a small town in northern Israel. He wasn't challenging the Romans. He wasn't pushing the nation to return to former glory. He wasn't anything that they expected. And as a result, they rejected him. Because don't we do the exact same thing? Jesus doesn't meet our expectations, so we reject him. He doesn't provide enough for us. He doesn't do enough miracles for us. He doesn't make all our problems go away. He's let some really, really bad things happen in our life. Right? And we tend to think, you know what? Like if Jesus really was a king, he wouldn't do all these things. And so we sort of knock him down a rung in our life. Right? No, we don't kick Jesus completely out of our life, but he loses that preeminent place in our hearts because he doesn't meet our expectations. So as we go through these, I want to kick this around. So thoughts. How many of you guys feel like, Marlon, that's something that I can relate to? Like Jesus doesn't meet my expectations and I struggle with that. Maybe that's something you can pray for me for. Like thoughts around that idea of rejecting Jesus when he does not meet your expectations. Can anyone identify with that? Start there. Feel free to share. Okay. Here's what I want. We're going to continue to move through these three. But the point of us being able to be on Zoom is to have a little bit more interaction. And so think about that. As we go through this list of reasons why we reject Jesus, if you feel like, hey, you know what, that one really relates to me, share with us. Why does that relate to you? Or maybe share, okay, hey, I could use prayer for that, Marlon, because that is definitely some way that I treat Jesus. Okay, so number 2. We reject Jesus because I can't even read my own writing. Because we want to fit in with everyone else. We want to fit in with everyone else. Look at verse 20. Think about this. It says, but the chief priests and the elders persuaded the multitudes that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. Remember, they're pressuring the people. What is this an example of? What do we call this in today's world? Peer pressure. Peer pressure, right? Guys, I can almost guarantee you there were tons of people in the crowd that had no beef with Jesus. Probably just the opposite. Some of them had probably seen his miracles, witnessed his teachings. Like they probably were a fan of Jesus. Really liked him. But because of the pressure of the chief priests and everyone else, what did they do? They caved. They didn't want to risk being singled out. They didn't want to risk going against the status quo. They didn't want to risk having everyone else turn against them and look at them like they're weirdos. Does this sound familiar? It should. Because I'm sure it's something that we've all struggled with. Guys, how many times have we rejected Jesus because someone at work, they said something dumb or inappropriate? Maybe it was even like borderline blasphemous, but we went along with it, right? We laughed it off. We didn't say anything because in the back of our minds, like, I'm not going to stick my neck out on the line. Like, I don't want everyone in the office to turn against me. Right? How many times have you felt the pressure being out with a group of friends to hide your faith just a little bit? Just dial it back just a little bit because come on. Like, I don't want to stand out as like this like fanatical Christian. And so, no, I'm not outwardly denying Jesus, but I'm just keeping it under wraps a bit. Guys, this is rejecting Jesus. And it's rejecting Jesus because we want to fit in with everyone else. So, thoughts? Who can relate? Who's dealt with this? Who's struggled with it? How have you dealt with it? Maybe encourage the group. Hey, if this is something that's been a real problem for you, like, what has the Lord done in your life? How has he helped you get through this? Keep thinking on it. Point 3, right? We reject Jesus because you're trying to straddle the fence. Meaning you're trying to play both sides or to stay in the middle. Look at verse 24, guys. Check this out. I thought this was interesting. When Pilate saw that he could not prevail at all, but rather that a tumult was arising, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I'm innocent of the blood of this just person. What is Pilate trying to do? Especially by the symbol of washing his hands and saying, hey, you guys will deal with it. What's he trying to do?
He doesn't want any part of it.
He's trying to play both sides. He's trying to please the crowd and give them what they want. Okay, you guys want to crucify Jesus? Fine, you can have that. But at the same time, he's trying to show, okay, well, I'm not really completely with you. I don't really have anything against this Jesus guy. I'm a bit innocent in all of this. He's trying to straddle the line. He's trying to play both sides. Guys, and here's the reality. We do the same. We do the same. Right? Here is what we need to understand. Like, when we try and follow in Pilate's footsteps, right? When we try and take both sides, it just doesn't work. You cannot be neutral when it comes to Christ. You cannot party hard on Friday and Saturday, getting drunk with your friends, and then on Sunday come to church and try and make up for it with Jesus. Right? You can't do that. You can't, kids, teens, young adults, anyone out there who's unmarried, you can't be in a relationship with a non-believer and justify it by saying, oh, I'm still a believer. Yeah, I know that they don't know God, but I'm sure that'll happen, eventually. Right? You can't play both sides. You can't be one way with your Christian friends and then a completely different way with your non-Christian friends. You cannot be neutral, guys, when it comes to Christ. Why? Look at the scriptures. Matthew 10:37. Think about these things. He says, he who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Matthew 10:34. Do you think that I came to bring peace to the earth? I didn't come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a person's enemy will be those of his own household. Those are strong words. Matthew 6:24. No one can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. Over and over again, Jesus is saying what? You can't have it both ways. Like, he is the dividing line, and you have to choose what side you're going to be on. Last thing, stay with me. We reject him because there is no room for him on the place of the throne of our hearts. We reject him because the throne of our hearts is too crowded. There's no room for Jesus. Did you ever notice that, like, there never seemed to be room for Jesus in all these different situations in the Bible? Think about it. Go back to his birth. There's no room for him in the inn. He had to be born out in the stable. There's no room for him in his own family. Look at Matthew 12:46. His family thought he was crazy. They didn't really want anything to do with him. There was no room for him in his hometown. Matthew 13 tells us that Galilee, Nazareth area, that was the one place he couldn't do a lot of miracles. He couldn't do a lot of ministry because they rejected him. Right? There was no room for him with the religious leaders. They hated him. They were jealous. They wanted to get rid of him. There's hardly any room for Jesus in our world today. But it's odd because there's room for Buddhism. There's room for mysticism. There's room for atheism and all the other isms, but there's no room for Jesus. You bring up Jesus and the world's like, oh no, get that out of here. Right? There never seems to be room for Jesus. But you know the saddest place? The saddest place where we don't find room for Jesus is in our own hearts. In our own hearts. There are so many things that Jesus has to fight through just to get to our hearts. So many things standing in the way. Whether it's TV or cell phone, meal times, kids' activities, work schedules, all these things Jesus has to, siphon his way through just to actually get to our hearts. And then when he finally gets to our hearts, what does he find? He finds a big occupied sign. And who's sitting on the throne of our hearts? Marlon is. And Trevor is. And Vivian is. And Jose is. And Jomar is. And John is. And Jan is. And Judah is. And Becca is. We are always sitting on the throne of our own hearts. There's no room for Jesus because we've crowned ourselves as king over our own lives. Guys, do you see my point here? We can look back at this story and be like, man, how did they reject Jesus? But we reject Jesus over and over. Our heart is so crowded, so prone to give away that throne to other things and other people and ourselves. It's not good. It's not good. Matthew's whole point in writing this gospel was to point the Jews and to point us back and say, hey, this guy Jesus is amazing. This guy Jesus is wonderful. This guy Jesus should be the king of your lives. Not just the king here and there, not just king of Sunday, but you get the rest of the days to yourself. Like the king of absolutely everything. Like he is so wonderful. He is so worthy of this. Here's what I want to do. We're going to take communion. But to wrap this up, I want to play a little video clip for you. The video is from a pastor. His name is Dr. S.M. Lockridge, and he pastored a church in San Diego called Calvary Baptist Church. And this was a little piece of a sermon that he gave at some sort of outreach in Detroit, Michigan in 1976. But the title of this sermon is That's My King. Have you guys heard this before? Okay. So get your communion elements ready. We're going to play this, and then we'll take communion when this is finished.
It's got some amazing brightness. It's not distracting. It's not annoying my eye.
My king was born king. The Bible says he's a seven-way king. He's a king of the